Okay, so we're going to do a little change up tonight, um, and we're going to talk about King Saul. Okay, and I mean, we've read about him, and 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 his little problems with David and everything. But um, I just wanted to do this, and I said we're going to talk about King Saul's spiritual journey, so to speak, because remember he is the first king, and him and David have had many problems. And so tonight we're going to just talk about King Saul, and he will, um, after tonight, um, well, we'll be back to David because Saul will not be with us. Anyway, so just looking at King Saul, um, from the beginning, and and if you can just pay attention to what his his mental state should be and all of that based on all these things that we're going to talk about. So remember Saul. Okay, Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin was a small tribe compared to Judah, and but Samuel was advised by God to anoint Saul the Benjamite as king. Saul himself, Saul was very attractive. Uh, he was very tall, and he was fearful at being anointed to be king. So it's kind of like, well, David, yes, was a shepherd boy, and he the same, but David was from the tribe of Judah, and so anyway, Saul was a little insecure at first, but so he many supported him, okay, but and like I say, Samuel was the one, the prophet, and he's the one that chose the king. And then too, if you remember before that, there was a political deal where some people wanted a king, some people did not want a king. So um, that's how it turned out for Saul. You know, there were many that supported him as the king, but there were others who despised him, and and kind of were was a where was like a pain in his side, so to speak. So then Saul was king for a couple of years, and then after Goliath, David and Goliath, Saul recruited David to command his troops and fight against the Philistines. And as we know, David became more successful than Saul. Remember uh, the the verse where said David Saul killed tens of thousands or thousands, and David killed tens of thousands. And so at that point in time, okay, jealousy is setting in with Saul. And so, and then we learned that Samuel and Saul, I say they had a falling out. Um, Basically, what had happened is that Samuel, remember the prophets advised the kings, okay? So Samuel had advised Saul to go out to the Amalekites, who were really not kind people at all. They were not nice people. And Saul and Samuel told Saul that he should go there and destroy the Amalekites. And what that meant back then, okay, is they destroyed everything. They killed the king, they killed all the people, they killed all the sheep, they killed all the living things, and they looted, they took all their spoil. That now Remember, that didn't come from God. That was cultural. And that is what they did. And when you read some of the details with David, David did some of that too, because that was cultural. That's what they did. And so, but in the instance that we have here with the Amalekites, Saul Saul was supposed to wait 7 days, and Samuel was going to be there. And anyway, what it turned out was that Saul did not follow the orders to destroy everything, and he saved the king and brought the king back. All right, but the problem there was that Saul disobeyed God. He disobeyed the order that Samuel said came from God to kill all those people. And so that is where Samuel, the prophet, and Saul parted ways. And and the and the reason and he Samuel told Saul was because you have rejected the word of the Lord. He has also rejected you from being king. All right, now what we're interested in here is, imagine King Saul's mental status at this point, okay? And I don't know, I don't know clearly about his personality, but being not real, I don't want to say educated, but experienced as a king and with people. So Samuel, he already had this jealousy, but the fact that now he's been rejected from being king, so he's not in a great state of mind. Okay. And we're going to focus on a couple of these verses here, just so you can get an idea of where things were at. Well, from a spiritual point of view, I guess. And so 1 Samuel 16:14. Okay. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from before the Lord troubled him. And once again, here it was jealousy. Okay. And then when we go on to 1 Samuel 18:12, and Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and had departed from Saul. So again, you can imagine what Saul is going through. I mean, he had been anointed by God actually through Samuel, and now he's had all of this, and now he is getting more afraid of David. So that's kind of where he was. That's where we left off. But now we're going to go to chapter 28, and this has some interesting stuff in it. And George, if you would you like to read the scripture?
Okay. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned over him and buried him in Ramtha in his sepulchre. And Saul had put away the diviners and the wizards out of the land. And the Philistines gathered themselves together and came and encamped in Shechem. And Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped in Gilgal. And when Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of the Lord, he did not answer him, either by dreams, or by fire, or by prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, "Seek me a woman who has a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servants said to him, "Behold, there is a woman who has a familiar spirit at Endor."
Okay.
And Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment. And he went and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And Saul said to her, divine for me by a familiar spirit, and bring up for me him who I shall tell you. And the woman said to him, behold, you know what Saul has done, how he has removed those who have familiar spirits and wizards out of the land. Why then are you laying a snare for my life to cause me to be put to death? And Saul swore by her, by the Lord, saying, as the Lord lives, there shall no harm come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, whom shall I say bring you up to you? And he said, bring me up Samuel. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And she said to Saul, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. Okay. Samuel the prophet was no more. So the only technically the only communicating with God, technically there wasn't anybody. Okay, because the Samuel the prophet had died, and there weren't any others at that point in time. And so when it says Saul had put away the diviners and the wizards, well, first of all, let's go back here. Okay, a diviner. Okay, a diviner. It's what we know as psychics and mediums. Okay, and okay, and he wanted somebody with a familiar spirit. Now, familiar spirit is knowledge. Okay, it's it's the knowledge of being able to communicate with the dead and divining and foretelling. Now, so that we understand this, merely she was a medium. That's what we now know nowadays as a medium. And I don't know how familiar many of you are with this, but a medium is simply a person who can talk with dead people on the other side. They can communicate. And so, but the thing about it is, says Saul had Saul had put away the diviners and wizards out of the land. Okay, from the very start, from the get go, so to speak, in Leviticus, in the rules, okay, they said, you shall not go after diviners, neither after the soothsayers. Same thing as medium psychic, nor shall you consult them to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Well, you know now that there were mediums and psychics just like today back then, but they would not, and the penalty was death if they found somebody, if they found a medium or person practicing, that was death. The reason, because they only believed that um, from the other side, from the universe, wherever, the only people that could get messages from God were the prophets, like Samuel. And so, uh, so, but what the problem was, okay, was that Saul Saul was beside himself. Okay, he was afraid, like it says back here. The Philistines were surrounding him. He was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled, and he had nowhere to turn. Okay, and notice it says, and when Saul inquired of the Lord, he did not answer him, either by dreams or by fire or by prophets. So Saul was afraid, tormented. He didn't know what to do, but he knew he wanted he wanted to he wanted one of these mediums, one of these whatever you wanted to call them, soothsayers, because as you just learned, he wanted to talk to Samuel. Okay, so what this woman is doing, just in case, I don't want to be too simple here, but in case you didn't know, I mean, a medium, all right, and I'm kind of familiar with this. I kind of I have a little side bent with spiritualism, but a medium a medium can um, the good mediums don't even have to go into a trance, but they can call on people who have gone to the other side. And so that is what he was doing. But you know, it says that he dressed up. Okay, he did a disguise. And why did he do a disguise? Because he didn't he didn't want people to know that he was going to seek one of these people because he had already put them out of the land. And of course, he thought he could disguise himself and the medium wouldn't know the difference. Well, I mean, she knew, okay, but she too was afraid because at first she didn't know it was Saul, but she was afraid because they could have killed her because she was put out of the territory because she wasn't allowed to do that. Um, so now, okay, so she did her thing, and Saul said, "Well, what you know?" Uh, he said, "You know, fear not; nothing will happen to you. But what do you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I saw gods ascending out of the earth." And I would put a parentheses there and just say spirits, so to speak. And he said to her, "What is their appearance?" And she said to him, "An old man is coming up, and he is covered with a mantle." And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and made obeisance. And Samuel said to Saul, now you have to picture this, okay? This is Samuel speaking from the dead, from the other side. And this does happen. Okay, mediums can go into a trance, and the uh, uh, whomever is from the other side can talk through them. So this is what was happening. Okay, and Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me to bring me up?" And Saul answered, "I am sore distressed, for the Philistines are making war against me, and God has departed from me." Notice that? And God has departed from me and answers me no more, although I have inquired by the prophets and also by dreams. Therefore, I have called you, that you may tell me what I shall do. And when she said, "A man is coming up and he's covered with a mantle," uh, it was an indication that it was a prophet because they buried prophets covering them with their mantles. Okay. Then Samuel said to Saul, Why do you ask of me, seeing the Lord has departed from you, and he is with your neighbor David, and the Lord has done to him as he spoke by me? For he has rent asunder the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord and did not execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore, the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me. Catch that now. The Lord also shall deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell straightway upon his face on the ground and was exceedingly afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all that day, nor all that night. Now, when it says, back there said that God departed from Saul. Well, just a little clarification here, based on our teachings. Like God doesn't enter or depart from anywhere. Okay, it was a belief. Remember, the belief system back then was that God um, was responsible, for everything. But in this case, we just need to understand that God didn't depart from Saul. Okay, but the maybe we can say the spirit of God, the but because now remember, Paul or Saul, Saul was jealous, and he had hate and revenge in his heart. And and when we talk about Jesus and the kingdom of heaven, it's there for everybody, and there's no conditions or anything. It is unconditional. But if you have jealousy or hate and revenge in your heart, then there's no room for the love of God to enter into your heart, which is what will make you free, make whatever. So, and it was the belief, and Samuel told Saul that he was going to die, and so that prophecy, and Saul, Samuel told Saul that he was going to die because he had disobeyed those orders. Okay, and but again, we have to go back to, okay, the prophecy is that Samuel said that he was going to die, and we'll see what happens here. But he didn't die because he disobeyed and whatnot. I mean, he died because he went to battle, and the Philistines won that battle big time. Okay, and so once again, we wouldn't say that he died because he disobeyed. I mean, that is something that is an old ancient thing, and Jesus of course changed, or tried to change all of that, but Samuel did prophesy about Saul's death, and so we're going to go to chapter 31. And George, if you'd like to read this. Okay.
Okay. Now the Philistines fought against Israel And the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and many fell dead on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan and Jeshui and Melchusha, Saul's sons. And the battle was intense against Saul, and the archers overtook him with bows, and he was exceedingly afraid of the archers. Then Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and slay me and abuse me." But his armor bearer would not, for he was exceedingly afraid. Thereupon Saul took his sword and fell upon it. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and also all of his servants, that same day together.
Okay. Now we're going to do a I don't know what they call it, but we're going to do a slight change here, change up, and we're going to the Gospels. And we're going to talk about hell now, and we'll put it all together, I promise. So if we go to Matthew 5:29, all right, if your rod eye should cause you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you, for it's better for you to lose one of your members and not have all your body fall into hell. Okay, now hell, all right, if we're thinking just in our culture, we're thinking, oh, okay, fall into hell, da 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 da. But hell and hellfire, there's only 3 verses that in the Lanza Bible that refer to hell or hellfire. Okay, but it is an idiom. It's not what we think. So, and remember, an idiom is a phrase or expression that typically presents a figurative, non-literal meaning attached to the phrase. So it's written out, it says one thing, but it means something different. And so hell, okay, according to Jesus from the Gospels, merely means deep regret, mental suffering, torment, or destruction. And and the behind the idiom, many times, most of the times, there's something behind the idiom, and what is behind this idiom from it refers back in the Old Testament, it refers to what was called the Valley of Hinnom, which was outside of Jerusalem, and it had it was a burning place, a big fireplace where, I mean, they burned bodies, they burned wherever, but it was a fire outside of Jerusalem that was constantly burning. Okay, and so that's the association of the idiom and the and uh, the basis of the basis for it, the literal basis for it. But it means deep regret, mental suffering, torment, or destruction. And so, from our cultural perspective, this is one of the places where the teachings here run into some trouble. But that's why I'm explaining this. And so, hell, it's not a place where God roasts people, okay? And it's not a place at all, and it's not where you go when you die. If you're bad, okay? I didn't put that in there, but the concept, and again, this is Jesus. Remember, Jesus was trying to bring peace. Uh, Gosh, it's we need him so much. We need this so much today. But so um, and so the theory behind this, and we're talking about mental torment and regret and everything, is that we create the hell right here on earth. Okay. Now, and the reason I brought this up is because ever since we started talking about Saul, I mean, and David, this has just come to me a million times. And King Saul, what he was experiencing, that is hell. Okay, the mental torment that he had. And see, we would say, yeah, well, he was a sinner and da 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 da, and he would go to hell. Well, no, that's not what Jesus taught. All right, so I'm not going to. Someday soon, I'm going to do a whole, just a whole whatever on hell and the concept, uh because it is well, it's complicated to understand, but once you understand it, um, to me, it makes sense. Um, but but all that we talked about King Saul, as he's experienced mental torment, hell, and that's where it's at. And then I'll just say one more word about that, because remember Jesus said main teaching was that heaven, okay, heaven is not a place either where you go when you die. Heaven is God's universe. That's God. Heaven is God. So there is heaven here on earth, and there's hell here on earth, but it's humankind that creates the hell, and it's humankind basically that creates the well God's God's kingdom of which is spirit and love, of course, is all around us. It's here. It's not that we create that, but we create our own heaven here on earth if we allow uh, that love of God to come in and hear His voice and His guidance. So I had to mention hell because it just was with me ever since we started this. And so, thank you again for your contributions. And so I have this for us tonight. I just uh, I hope it inspires some discussion. But I mean, can we accept this definition of hell? And how's this change things?